Recording music at home is as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. See, on one hand, somebody just starting out recording, they could very easily plug in a microphone to an audio interface, hit record, and start recording. The truth is, in the contemporary state of audio technology, that recording that beginner produced would be entirely usable. You've really already made it about 60% of the way there just by doing that. But the more you learn, the more you realize the intricacies involved in taking that 60% all the way up to 100%. That fine tuning of all the small details, that's the stuff that takes years to learn. So I envision this as kind of like a fast track to get you from what might be a 40% jump down to just like maybe 10 to 15%. I'm also happy to announce that we're doing this in partnership with Neat Microphones. They're producing some of the highest quality budget microphones for the price, and I am super excited to show you what they can do here. Today we'll be going through the entire production process for a singer-songwriter setup, specifically with our friend and colleague Ethan Toga. Go check out his YouTube channel in the description down below. So let's start with step number 1, beyond of course just having a well-practiced good song. The microphone, the beginning of the signal chain. Today we'll be using the King B2, one of my all-time favorite budget microphones, and its little sibling, the Worker B2. Okay, let's backtrack just a second though and talk about the nature of microphone selection. First and foremost, there are generally two different kinds of microphones, that being dynamic and condenser. Now obviously there's a bunch of other ones besides that, namely ribbon microphones, but when you're making your first decision, especially as a beginning producer or recording artist, these are generally the two options you're presented with. So the guts of these two different kinds of microphones are actually quite different. And correspondingly, the tone and the sensitivity of these two different kinds of microphones are also very different. I have another video exploring microphone anatomy and the more nuanced differences between those two different kinds of microphones. I'll link it, but we don't have time for it today. But here are some general tropes that you'll find between dynamic and condenser microphones. Dynamic microphones can reject more of the room, they can take more sound pressure or louder signals, and are generally considered to be more robust. They're not very fragile at all. Condenser microphones pick up more detail, they also pick up more of the room, and they're more sensitive to changes in dynamics, meaning the difference between a loud part of the song and a quiet part of the song. Now, the song we're going to be recording today is a very dynamic song with a quiet, soft verse and a loud chorus where Ethan is essentially belting. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Okay guys, I have made an entire second channel just devoted to the performances that you see here. This is one of the most beautiful performances Ethan has ever done on the channel, and I've put the full performance video on Haze Sessions is what I've decided to call it. So I would love it if you went and checked it out and subscribed. There will be plenty more to come, and hopefully even your music too, because I would love to feature subscribers. You can kind of lump microphones into the categories of dark, bright, and neutral. Darker microphones have more low end, brighter microphones have more high end or treble, and neutral doesn't really boost either of these very much. Neutral microphones try to remain flat without biasing any specific frequencies so that you can make the decision in post. So the decision is up to you on what you would like to emphasize. For example, let's say you have a dark, low voice. A little bit like mine. Well, there are a few different ways I could look at this. If I pick a dark mic, I'm saying, do I want to exaggerate those features on my voice to be even lower, even darker than they already are? Or do I want a bright mic to even out my signal and provide a complementary frequency range that might add a little bit of sparkle that is missing if I were to just use a dark microphone or even a neutral microphone? The same thing goes for guitar too. You know, if you have a brighter guitar like a Taylor or a Telecaster, how do you want to approach this? Do you want to exaggerate the features of that instrument, or would you rather tame it and provide a balance? The decision is up to you, and the decision is up to the style of production you're going for. Now, the King B is certainly a mellower, dark microphone. And I would argue it is probably the best option for a budget dark condenser microphone. For under $200, it does offer some seriously impressive specs to it. And that includes stuff like one of the lowest self noises on the market, regardless of price, a 34mm gold sputtered capsule. It also has a custom pop filter and shock mount, and one of the warmest, smoothest tones I've heard from a microphone, even regardless of price. So we can expect a mellower, warmer tone from the King Bee and the Worker Bee. And in the context of a singer-songwriter session, and in the context of specifically the song we're working with today, that's great. I'm kind of going for a log cabin vibe, okay? Campfire. So darker tones seem to make sense to me. Now in this tutorial, we'll be using two different condenser microphones to mic the guitar and the vocals. This is one way of doing things, but not the only way. This is going to give a different style of production, different method of production even, as opposed to a condenser and a dynamic or a dynamic and a dynamic. We can assume because a condenser microphone is more sensitive to the environment around it, even though one microphone might be centered on the guitar and the other one on the voice, we will get bleed from both instruments, which means we'll be picking up the vocals in the guitar mic and we'll be picking up the guitar in the vocal mic. This is by no means a bad thing, as some of you guys might expect it to be. It's simply a different method of recording, albeit one that might leave you with less options in post. Two condenser microphones paired correctly and in the right position could conglomerate to make a more detailed audio image than, say, if we had a dynamic microphone on the voice. So when positioning these two different microphones, I'm going to have two different things in mind. One, trying to reject as much noise as possible, even though we're fighting an uphill battle to begin with. And more importantly, trying to get the least amount of coloration to the signal that is not priority, if that makes sense. See, if I were to talk off axis to the King Bee here, you're going to notice obviously a drop in volume, but you will also notice that there's much less low end than if I were in front of the capsule. We're going to do the same kind of technique on the guitar and the vocals. We're going to have the least amount of coloration possible for the vocals on the guitar mic and the least amount of coloration to the guitar in the vocal mic. Okay, so these are the raw files. Check out the coloration of the vocals on the guitar take, and then check out the coloration of the guitar on the vocal take.
As I waste another night chasing phantoms, but all I need is an introduction. As I waste another night chasing phantoms, but all I need is an introduction.
So this is really what we're after. Not a stylized vocal on the guitar take and not a stylized guitar on the vocal take.
So with that said, and our microphone picked, let's talk about room position. See, much like how acoustic guitars have different tonal properties depending on where you put the microphone, your room is the same way. They're both resonant chambers. Everyone's recording environment will be different, and therefore we all have slightly different sounding spaces. It's really important to consider the space you're recording in part of the recording. In general, unless you're trying for something a little bit more experimental, there are some guidelines we can follow in order to get what is generally considered a good sounding recording. And by that I mean a position that is generally considered to be the least reflective, least obtrusive part of your room. This means we want to find something that is acoustically dead, meaning the least amount of reflections possible. Now, believe it or not, clutter and messiness actually help here. Anything that mitigates parallel walls or flat surfaces and breaks up those sound waves into smaller, less powerful sound waves, that's going to be our friend here. Closets are usually a good example of this description. We can't record in my closet because it's not a walk-in. Now also, one thing that you should know is corners of rooms actually build up low-end information, base information. You'll notice a strange amount of low-end activity. Okay, so avoid corners. Avoid the center. The center of a symmetrical symmetrical room is typically a place where a lot of harmonic information starts to converge. I typically find that slightly off axis from the center of a symmetrical room is your safest bet. There's room to work with here, and again, this is not an exact science. So let's talk about microphone positioning. Microphone position is another one of those things that does not have a clear answer. There are standard positions that will generally yield good results, but they are by no means the only position. In fact, in this tutorial, we used a position that is generally considered a little bit irregular. Let's start with acoustic guitar. The general rule of thumb is a microphone positioned closer to the neck and the strings will yield a brighter tone. You also get more string noise, which you may or may not want. Now, microphones positioned closer to the larger resonant chamber part of the instrument, they tend to produce a warmer, darker tone, because that's kind of where bass frequencies begin to resonate within the chamber. The closer you get to the sound hole, the more low end you're going to pick up. If you put the microphone right in front of the sound hole, it'll be really woofy. I do also have to emphasize though that these are rules of thumb and are not always consistent. For example, if you put a microphone towards the lower resonant chamber part of the guitar, but you position it really close to the bridge, you're still going to get a brighter tone because of the string tension close to the bridge.
So check this out. Rather than doing a static comparison of different positions on the guitar, I actually just ended up moving the worker bee around the guitar so you could get an idea of what it does to the tone. Notice the change in brightness as I move the microphone towards the bottom left of the guitar.
In this clip, you can really tell why we chose to go with this position on guitar. Listen to the change in vocal quality as Ethan belts the chorus here.
All I need is an introduction.
Now, many of these positions will not work with a dynamic microphone. Dynamic microphones need a closer proximity to get a similar kind of volume and tone, although tone will never quite be the same. Now, let's go on to vocal position, because vocal position can be relatively straightforward or it cannot be. Kind of up to you here. Much like the guitar, vocals will produce a different tonal quality depending on the position of the microphone relative to the sound source. Directly in front of your mouth will produce the most straightforward signal, but bear in mind you're going to need a pop filter. These P sounds can physically hit a capsule. I'll put an example here.
Pretty painful if we just carry on with these P sounds.
We call these plosives. Now, with the King Bee, we don't have this issue because we have the integrated pop filter, thankfully. Now, you can also adjust the microphone in a bunch of other different ways to get a different sounding result. For example, raising a microphone above a singer will make the singer extend their chin upwards, opening up the airways. This results in a brighter, louder take than a straightforward shot. Now, remember, we're using two different condenser microphones, and that means their position relative to each other is fairly limited if we want to limit mic bleed. We're gonna get mic bleed. We do have to embrace it, but we at least want the guitar condenser to not have a colored vocal tone. And that means keeping the guitar mic off axis from the vocal. We also want to keep the vocal mic positioned to reject the most guitar. You can see in this montage here, we're trying a few different microphone positions and seeing what works, and then we're setting up a final signal. Now, whenever we started going through the different positions on the microphone, we ended up settling on a kind of irregular guitar position specifically. We put the worker bee up higher than we normally would, facing down towards the sound hole. And this was mainly done to reject as much of the voice as possible. We also liked kind of the sweeter, warmer tone that it was giving us. We ended up putting the neat King Bee pretty much smack in front of Ethan for the most part. Nothing too fancy here. Now, it's time to power on your microphones. Any condenser is going to need what's called phantom power or 48 volt power. Make sure not to unplug your condenser microphone with phantom power on. That can damage it. Now, open your software and set your inputs. I'm sorry I can't be more specific here, but it's going to vary from different DAW to DAW. Here's some screen recording of what it would look like on my software. Now observe your signal chain as your performer begins to rehearse. If you are the performer, congratulations, you get to do this all yourself. Life's hard for the working class musician, I know. So we want to peak at around negative 12 dBFS, or negative 12 decibels. Now also bear in mind that performers typically underestimate the volume they'll be recording at during the actual performance. Rehearsals, leveling takes, these things are always usually a little bit quieter than the actual thing. So I would probably turn down your volume by a couple decibels just to be safe. So we're all set up and ready to rock. Let's see how our production sounds, and we'll switch from a processed mixed signal to the raw signal. This is Ethan Toga, our resident singer-songwriter, otherwise known as my roommate. Here's his YouTube channel if you want to hear more of his music. Enjoy his performance of Friends I Never Made.
Here we go. Maybe one day I'll stop hating the sound of my own voice. And you'll fall right into my arms. But the presently silent sentiments fade into the noise as I waste another night chasing phantoms. But all I need is an introduction, or I can't find no peace of mind. So cut me loose from this obsession. Strike my third eye blind.
So YouTube tells me right about now is when most of you start to skip the performance and go to the end of the video. So if you'd like to see the rest of the performance, go check out the second channel. I promise you, it's a wonderful piece.
Is your head frame? Are we cropping the top of your head?
I mean, it's like while I'm playing, I slouch, so
Just turn it up a little bit so we have some room.
some headroom. Are you recording for that?
So this, for all intensive purposes, is about half the battle. Next comes mastering and mixing. You already heard during that performance the difference between a processed tone and an unprocessed tone. And covering those concepts will merit an entirely separate video. So I hope this helped. You can check out the Neat King Bee on Amazon. I'll leave an affiliate link down in the description down below. I've had plenty of experience with the King Bee. It is unquestionably my favorite dark, warm microphone under $200. It's an absolute powerhouse for gaming, voiceover, obviously, clearly for musical production, you name it. It's incredibly flexible. Again, go check out the performance channel. If nothing else, this is the purest form of demonstration I can possibly give you without any exhibition or voiceover. You can follow me on Instagram at RealAudioHaze, and if you'd like to work on a project with me, you can email me at realaudiohaze@gmail.com. See you in the next video.